All right, we have all 5 members of the town council here. I'm sure several members of the special committee are listening in. The purpose of tonight's meeting is really to have a town forum where the developers of Corso Chevy Chase, as we're now learning to call it, are going to make a presentation that will be responsive to the letter that the town sent 6 weeks ago or so, but also in general present their updated views of their concept plans that they had presented to us back in February. Before we start, if I might, just one comment. We've gotten a lot of messages, and our town office has, of people concerned about slowdowns and picking up trash and debris and the yard waste. And just to let everybody know that our companies undertaking these service for us have been hit by a triple whammy, both the holiday, which of course delayed things a bit, also the weather, but also COVID is really spreading here, and they have had to send a lot of their workforce home, so they're really understaffed. So just hope that everybody in town can bear with them as they work through their schedules. They will get to everybody, but it will just obviously take some additional time. As for COVID, I came down with it. I'm basically over it. I'm fine. But Rich's wife has come down with it. I hope she's recovering, Rich, and just signals the importance of boosting and vaxing and boosting. But clearly we're on a real increase here. So that's the reason that we decided that the better part of valor was to have tonight's discussion solely virtually and trust that's amenable to everybody. And so we're all ready and look forward very much, Tim and Grant, to your presentations. What we'll be doing, as we've done before, is that any questions that residents have, please type them into the chat box. The chat box will only be seen by Todd, and he will marshal all the questions and at the end be able to put them together and ask them so that everybody can make sure we can, and that way I think most efficiently make sure that everybody's questions or concerns have been raised in respect to what we hear tonight. But we also should realize that this obviously will be we'll be seeing things tonight that none of us have seen before, and we're not expecting everybody to react immediately. So I'm sure a lot of the questions will be more in the range of clarification, but we will be taking more time, obviously, to talk to the special committee and also to get further comments and thoughts from residents before making a further response. In any event, we're very grateful to have this opportunity to hear from both of you gentlemen, and look forward to your presentation. Do any of my colleagues on the council have any comments before we start? Just looking around. Okay, great. Good. So turn it over to you gentlemen to present the revised plans for Corso Chevy Chase.
Sure.
Grant, you're on mute.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah, Tim, Todd had to do it. Well, thanks, Barney. I appreciate having this meeting and everybody getting together. You know, we tried to get it in person. We really tried. We've been trying each one of these, but you know, we'll keep trying, and hopefully one day they'll be in person. But our goal here today is really just to update you on where we are, but you know, really to do two main things. One is to respond to some of the comments and requests that were in the letter that the town provided to us, a very detailed letter, which we really appreciate. And the second is to really talk about the process, because I want to make sure that we all understand where we are in the process, where we're going in the short term, where we're going in the long term, and kind of chart out some steps to get us to where we all need to be. And so some of it's going to be technical, but I hope if you just stick with me, we'll get through it and you know, answer as many questions as you have. Again, I'm here with Tim Gary, and I'm going to share my screen. Let's do this.
Grant, before you start, I just realized one thing I should add. 4 of the 5 of us on the town council are the same as people you've met before. Yep. Joel, Joy, Irene, and myself. But we are joined by a new member, Rich Brancato, who's joined us just last month. So I want to make sure I introduced him.
Welcome. Let me do this and go to there. Let me see if I can do. Probably stop that.
Grant, can I assume that you'll be sending over the slide deck to the town so we can post it?
I will.
Great.
Yes. Let me just see here. Can I share?
We did see it for a second.
Yeah, for some reason it's not wanting to share. So I'm going to do it this way. Just give me a second. Okay. Let's share this now. Okay, you can see that, correct?
We don't see it right, at least I don't see it right now. Okay, this is promising.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, now we see it.
Let's see if I can do it in full screen mode so that you can see the whole thing.
Right.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, good.
All right, good. So again, what I want to go through, we're just going to touch briefly at the beginning about overview. We've added a couple of people to the team, and Tim's going to talk a little bit about, remind us about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Again, we're going to talk about timeline and the process of where we are and where we're going. We're going to address some of the comments, show you some views. There's been a lot of meetings that have gone on in the last couple of months, and then talk about some next steps. Just briefly, we've added two quite notable groups to the team. One's a local traffic engineer at Wells and Associates, who's been helping us analyze the existing and future traffic flows, as well as Mahan Reichel, who's a landscape architect who's worked with on several projects before and does some really great work. So I just wanted to update this slide to show you who else is on the team. With that, I'm going to give it to Tim to talk a little bit about the community.
Yeah, well, thanks, Grant. Yes, nice having all the new team members, and I really want to thank everybody who's participating and involved in this process. You know, it's a lot of hard work and it's a complex project to put together. So it's really taking everybody's efforts to make this happen. So one of the things we want to do is you've seen this slide before. I'm just going to briefly speak to it, and then we're going to move on to a little bit more about how we create a senior living community. In this particular slide, what we're talking about here is the core values of gallery living. And it's really important to remember these: dignity, happiness, excellence, and innovation. And these all play into spaces, people, services, and tech. But the one we're going to focus on today are spaces, because it relates to how the community lays out, it relates to how the community works, and it relates to how it fits into Chevy Chase. So let's go to the next slide. The one thing that we have done as a company is we've adopted health sustainability for senior living as our model. And the reason is because there's quite a few gaps in senior living, and it creates a lot of debt on future society. And when you look at the gap here, it's complex. It speaks to transparency, senior scale environment, and proactive care. We don't have time to cover all these and to go into the depths of how to fix all the gaps, but tonight we're going to talk about the senior scale environment component of it and how this helps reduce this future debt. And one particular is the social death component. It really helps to prevent alienation and things like that, because those are the ones that in the long run increase the frequency of hospitalizations and the severity of major health events. So those are the things that we're solving for in our overall concept that we're talking about in our design process. So let's go to the next slide. The definitions at the top, and you can continue to read that. And, we've used the World Health Organization definitions for a lot of our work here. But in this, in the health sustainability, there's a framework that we use called CREATE. And CREATE helps us to make informed decisions about everything we do when we are considering a community, considering how we lay it out in a community, and how it works internally for providing care of a resident. So some things are direct, and then some things are not direct care. So for example, you have care and community harmony, and you have relational spaces, empowered health journeys, anticipatory support, transparent intent, and ethical commitment. The one that we're going to go back to, and the one that we've all talked about now for several months, is relational spaces. And it goes back to what we were just talking about, fulfilling that gap that's in senior living. The gap in senior living, it's a big one, and it hasn't been addressed until recently. And it's very important because in the past, senior living has only looked at where the nurse's station was in a building, or it only looked at where the dining room was in the building. But what it didn't do, and what it hasn't done in the past, is looked at how those spaces are related to the unit layouts, where the unit mix, and the configuration of the overall unit plan of the project. And then at a higher level, how does that fit into the neighborhood? And what we have found is if those components are all pulled together appropriately, what you get is you get a happier customer, which is back to our core values in our business. So last time, I think we spent a good bit of time here talking about shop spaces. And we showed you views of shop spaces. We showed you site plans of shop spaces and how that works and how that creates and promotes intergenerational spaces. Intergenerational spaces, it keeps all of our residents a part of the community. It keeps them a part of active in the community, and it improves their overall social health. So what we're going to focus on this time, and I think what you're going to see as we go through these slides, and I'm going to come back to this, particularly as we're answering questions, but you're going to see in our future slides, like how what we're doing is we're laying out the spaces so that we've centered our common spaces, but they have transitions from building to the common spaces that create social environments. And these are really important because it's just, if you take a resident who's an introvert, they can walk through certain social spaces and they don't have to talk to anyone. But if it's aligned appropriately, if the transitions are appropriate and the distances are appropriate, they have a social interaction, whether they're actually talking to someone or not. If you take an extrovert, it gives them the opportunity to sit and talk to someone. You've created a transition in the space for them to fulfill the need of their personality. So what we've worked really hard with is we've taken all your comments and we've considered them in great detail, and it's taken a lot of back and forth between land planners and civil engineers and architects and just everyone involved from the operational team to really understand how to preserve this health sustainability model, whether it's care or empowered health or anticipatory support, and also meet all of your comments that you've laid out. And I think we've done a really good job of that. I think you're going to see some really impressive concepts coming out in the designs that we've done. But in one of the big components you're going to see as we go through this is how we've taken the unit mix so that you can have all levels of care, so that really people can continue to dine together. They can continue to be entertained with family together, and so they can keep their friendships. And it's about how we've clustered these unit mixes closer to the common spaces and then transition them in out as we go closer to the neighbors. And so I think it's been a really powerful and exciting design process. And so I'm going to let Grant start going through that next process of how we're going to pull all that together.
Sure. Thank you. So last time we spoke, we showed this slide. We were in February of 2022 when we shared the concept plan. And the next phase was this local map amendment phase, which you now see in red, which is which we're in. That phase is made up of several steps, which I'll explain in a minute. But it's part of a larger process that we're going through, which includes the local map amendment, or an LMA, and the site plan process, building permit through to construction and occupancy. So that whole process is anticipated to take about 4.5 years. We are kind of right at the beginning of that at this moment. I want to spend just a little bit of time focusing on what is in an LMA and what is in a site plan, so that we can all understand what we need to work on now and what we can work on later down the road. We can't work on everything all at once because certain decisions of concept need to move forward first before we get into more detail. So those two processes, the LMA and the site plan, the local map amendment has a survey. It has a plan that shows basic, maximum density and height. It shows where the location of generally the open spaces are. It talks about fire access and a statement about traffic. The most detailed part really looks at the where the forest stand is going to be kept. And then there's a narrative about stormwater management, not necessarily a design, but a strategy. It's very different from what the site plan process is, where there is actual buildings and actual height and actual density. There's architecture involved. All the landscaping elements and pedestrian vehicular circulation is finalized. Lots of engineering work. Affordable housing mix gets involved then. Detailed stormwater management plans and utility plans. So the first part is very conceptual and has just a basic structure. The second part has a lot more detail to it. As an example, this is not this project, it's a different project, but you can see what a plan of a LMA process kind of looks like. It's an outline of a building, has some arrows where there's potential entrances, whereas in the site plan process, there's so much more detail: grading, utilities, internal layout of spaces, stormwater management, lots of detail going on. Here's another project, not this project, but another example of where we are now, which is on the right-hand side in determining the basic concept versus the site plan process, which has everything down to how many, little tiny hydrangea plants are planted in this one section. Since we're in the LMA process, I wanted to go through that timeline in detail. When we get to the site plan process, which will be in the spring, next spring, we'll update this and give a more detailed explanation of how the site plan process works. But I wanted to make sure that everyone understood what we're going to do for these 10 months that we're in right now. I also wanted to highlight kind of what we're going to work on this summer, so that we can all prepare. And I know a lot of people are traveling and vacation, but we can at least understand what the tasks and goals are for this summer. But just to go through this briefly, we shared a concept plan with the town in February. We've had, I think, 8 or 9 different one-on-one or group interactions with neighbors that are around the site. They've been very helpful for us to hear directly from people who live next to the former 4-H headquarters, and you just hear opinions and how the neighborhood works. And it's been very helpful for us to understand that. It's going to be even more helpful for us as we go through the site plan process, but it is very helpful now as well. We received comments from the town, and we also provided the NRI SFD. That is the natural resource inventory, and the forest stand delineation. That's the plan that shows what's there on the site. And we've submitted that to Montgomery County. I understand that last week or the week before, there were people from the county on site going through to check on it, to make sure that it was that's correct. Today's June 2nd, and we're providing an update and response to the comments. This summer, we're going to provide a draft of the LMA application and a letter of intent, and I'll get into what that letter of intent is. But this summer, in a couple of weeks, we're going to provide that for your review, comment, and with the goal of submitting that LMA application, near the end of August. In order to do that, we will work on with the town a letter of intent, and that letter of intent will outline some kind of basic ground rules for the development during the LMA process, and potentially what will be in future agreements as we go through the site plan process as well. Again, I'll get into that in a second. After that, there is many months of going through the county review. There's a planning board hearing, a zoning hearing, ultimately ending with the county council hearing, which would be sometime in March. But I wanted to lay this out, and we can come back to this later on, but really wanted to focus on what our tasks right now are during this summer as we move forward towards the submission of the LMA. So this was the concept plan that we shared in February, and it had a series of buildings, a walking path around the entire site, 2 entry points on Connecticut Avenue, again, a series of buildings of varied heights, theater, clubhouse, some shops along at the entrance, and you can see it here located, between Woodside, Connecticut Avenue, Thornapple, and Meadow. And the town provided us a set of comments that were really in kind of 5 categories, and I'm going to go through those categories, but they're the ones that are listed here on the left. So just to begin with traffic management. One of the comments was avoid, introducing traffic cuts through on Woodside and Thornapple. And, we have said that from the beginning, and the concept plan has had that. And we agree that that is a good move, and we've included it. So you'll see on this list, when we have a checkbox, it means we agree, and we're gonna do that. Primary ingress and egress on Connecticut Avenue. Again, yes, that is something that we are moving forward with. There was a request to provide the traffic study and impact statements for the town review. And yes, when we, in 2 weeks, when we provide the draft LMA, it will be part of that, and we'll provide that to the town. So these 3 elements that were part of the traffic management, I think we've done a good job of saying yes, and we'll include those things as we go forward. The second big category was forest conservation, public access, and stormwater management. Some of these are kind of grouped together, but preservation of the existing tree canopy on Thornapple on the western edge, the southern edge as well. Those are all important and very important for the neighbors that I visited with over the last couple months. You asked to provide the NRI, and we provided that to the town. You asked for the establishment of forest conservation easements on the area, and yes, we will be providing those, and where they will be, generally on the western and northern sides of the property, but we will be providing that as one of the detailed drawings in the LMA application. So you will see that in a couple weeks. You've asked to maintain the wildlife habitats and include the town forester in the conversation. Yes, we commit to keeping those habitats healthy. We want them to be healthy for the residents of Corso, but they're great for the environment, and we intend to keep them as natural habitats as well. There was a request that no changes to those wooded areas be modified outside of the LMA or site plan process, like go and cut down some trees now. We've agreed that we're not going to do that. Anything that is done to those areas is going to be done through the LMA process or through the site plan process that is, in full public view. So we're on board from that. Commitment to include the town in the stormwater management design process, definitely. As I've mentioned before, the county has some very rigorous requirements. When I met with a lot of people around the site, there was questions about runoff. We did discuss, part of the reason why there is some runoff now is that there's a lot of surface parking lots. We won't have that issue after the development. So we anticipate that runoff will be minimized greatly, but still, we will include the town in that process. It will be shared with you, and it will be for public review and comment. Here's a 50% one. There's a lot of discussion about the pathway. And the initial thought was, let's kind of activate this forest that is there. And the further we got into it, the more time I spent back there and understood it. It really wants to be a natural environment. So placing a path on the western side is not something that we would like to move forward with. But we would like to connect to the town streets and the town sidewalks. And, the important thing of that is that, as Tim mentioned, this connectivity, this interaction is very important for the health of the residents of Corso. And so not having someplace to connect to or to walk to or come out of your front door and continue on into the neighborhood is something that we don't want. We would just want to have that connectivity. So we won't be providing a path through the forest, but along the edge so that we can access the town sidewalks is something that we would continue to explore. So this is the site plan. This is an update of the concept plan. It looks very similar in its arrangement of buildings and access. Some of the building shapes have changed based upon the arrangement of different types of tenure that Tim mentioned. One of the largest things that you can see that has changed is the walking path through the back. So we've come up with this new open space plan, and what this shows is the existing town sidewalks that are shown in blue. So along Connecticut, Woodside, Meadow, Thornapple, those are the existing ones that are there. We've taken the approach of basically adding this redevelopment to the town. And that includes reinforcing the access and entrance along Connecticut Avenue. You'll see the orange or red kind of line there of a double sidewalk and individual front entry doors that are located along Connecticut. And you'll see that kind of wraps the corner on each of the buildings to make sure that the architecture of the buildings and that the interaction is consistent. You'll notice that along the southern edge of the buildings, we've maintained that walkway. And then along the northern edge of the buildings, we've retained that walkway as well. And we've made two connections to the sidewalk. One is to Woodside Place. I understand that even to go from Woodside Place to Connecticut, you've got to go all the way around and down. And this would be one better connection for just local residents, but also for the residents of Corso to walk and interact with the neighborhood. So it's our opinion that this is a reasonable solution to the situation that's there, still maintaining the porosity on Connecticut Avenue for pedestrians and vehicular access, but more of the attention is paid to Connecticut Avenue and minor connections to the surrounding streets via sidewalk. Another one of the 5 elements was shared amenities. There was a request that the town residents be able to join events at the Corso Theater, and we encourage it. And so we're excited about that. And yes, definitely that is something that we are interested in. There was a request to have the theater open to official town meetings. And we think it's a great idea because it will help, facilitate engagement, not just between residents, but also between the governing body of the town and the residents of Corso. So we're definitely on board for that. Another one of the things that we really toiled with was the indoor pool and how much access is given outside of the Corso residents. And we decided that it really is a pool for the residents of Corso. It's not a public pool. We don't want to have, people driving from elsewhere to get to the pool and using town roads and create a burden of that amenity, if you will, on the site. That's not to say that a few years down the road, if the pool is underutilized, that we could set up some rules for an age-restricted use of town residents of the pool. That sounds great to us. But of course, we need to evaluate that based upon what happens as we get into operations of the pool itself. So I've got that one as a 50%. Some people were very excited about having more openness of the pool. I've heard a lot of comments about not having an open pool. And so we decided to not have an open pool, but hopefully in the future, if there's capacity and it's not putting a burden on something, we could work something out for that. If the indoor pool is shared, certainly the parking garage will be available, so that people aren't driving from elsewhere and parking on Thornapple or Woodside or wherever. Design and commercial use was the fourth element. One was to keep fencing or walls to a minimum. This is certainly a balance between keeping the residents of Corso safe, not just from the outside, but from themselves, but also making a good urban environment. And I think we've done that with a balance of, less fencing or walls along Connecticut and parts of the corners that wrap, the Thornapple edge and to the south, and then having more typical fencing along the backside so that the southern tree area doesn't become a hangout or someplace that people could get hurt or are dangerous. There was a request for the exterior lighting to be dark sky compliant, and we agree with that. We need it to be that way as well because there are going to be residents that are sleeping and need the lights not to be in their way. One of the other comments was about enhancing the landscaping with adequate soil depth. As you may remember, the site has kind of a one-story underground garage. And, typically a garage has concrete on it and you walk on the concrete. Well, this garage has actually some areas on it that are much deeper and can take soil and plantings. And so we are including that all over. We've got to do it from a stormwater management perspective, but we're also able to do it because the parts of the garage have to be taller than others for ambulance access, and the parts that don't have to be that tall, we can make thicker with with plantings and with trees and the like. There was a request to have limited shops, the small coffee shop, the ice cream parlor, the florist, those were, in the realm of things that were acceptable. If there was anything else, consult with the town on those. And certainly we're committing to that as well. For not just for the shops, but for people coming for a short term to, somebody coming to deliver flowers or, a birthday cake or whatever that may be, we are having short-term parking. So those people, when they come to the property, they can come and park in the garage. They won't be parking on, Connecticut or Thornapple or Woodside and then walking in. One request, and it was an interesting one, to have the plans reviewed and evaluated by DAP. And for those of you who don't know who DAP is, that's the Design Advisory Panel that was set up by Montgomery County specifically to review projects that are in the downtown Bethesda zone as they relate to the downtown Bethesda guidelines and as they relate to design points that you use in terms of your rezoning or your site plan approval. And We do not see going that route. It's not a requirement of the site plan or LMA process, initially because we're not in downtown Bethesda. But it's also, we wouldn't want to be, from the town's perspective, and I think from our perspective, not being reviewed in that light, because there may be things that the town doesn't like, or there may be things that we don't like, and I think our effort should be on working together to work on the design. If there are, consultants that you want to bring on board to help, with the design effort, we're happy to do that. But we don't think that the DAP is the right approach, and we can continue to talk about what kind of design review you guys want to be involved in as we go forward. Lastly, you asked in this section, you asked for additional information on massing and views, so I can go through that now. So these two drawings are sections through the site, and the top one is a north-south section. So it goes from Thornapple on the left, and then goes down. It doesn't cut through Woodside, but it shows the first house on Woodside. And you'll see here how the garage interacts with the site, how the buildings are of varied height and roof lines, how they're set back from the edge of the property line, which is shown in yellow, how the 81-foot buffer is maintained on Thornapple, and how there's internal courtyards to the project where landscaping will be provided. This doesn't show the detail of the thickening of that slab and being able to provide it, but it's more of a site section. The one on the bottom shows a section kind of cutting through the middle of the site from east-west. So it cuts from Connecticut Avenue on the right through the middle of the site back to the first house that is back on Meadow Lane. You can see the change in topography, the forest stand that is on the western edge of the site. You can see how the garage is located, not on the entire site, but at that one portion of the site where you cut through there. And then you can also start to see here, and again, these are still concepts, but start to see where the loading would be all the way here, tucked under the hill. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure is not only from the residents of Corso, but also from the surrounding neighborhood, that we tried to minimize the view of trash and loading by lowering it below grade. So what we also did is we took a number of photos around the property. I took a bunch of photos on or about April 14th. So they were right when the trees were starting to come in. They weren't at full bloom, but they weren't sticks. And we took 6 photos around the site. And then what we did is we took our concept model and photoshopped them into those views, so we could all see kind of what they look like. And we not only use this as a tool to show the community, but also as a tool for us to see, well, where are things looking good? Where do we need more of this and more of that? So the models that you see that are in these views are very rudimentary. They have basic windows and roof lines and shapes. They are not full baked designs, but they do show the character and scale that we're looking at here. It's a series of buildings that are at the tallest in the middle and that taper down on the edges around the perimeter of the building. We're going to start with this one on Thornapple, where this orange dot is. So this is the picture I took in mid-April. We're here on Thornapple Street. We're looking back at Thornapple. This is the existing trees save that is there. Again, April, so you can see there's not a lot of leaves on the trees, but you can see where the building would be in relation to Thornapple Street. Some of the elements of changing colors from stone to metal panel to windows, some of the differing roof heights, but generally showing how the building will sit on the land when it's built. I'm assuming the trees are going to be a little bigger in 5 years from now or 4 years from now, but I think you get the idea. And of course, we're going to load this presentation on the town's website, so you can come and look at these more at your leisures. I know it's a lot to take in at a very short time. This is a picture taken actually from the Burlers' front yard. This is their house, which is fantastic and a wonderful part of the history of the town of Chevy Chase. But you can see here is a corner of the building that wraps around the corner, the front facade of the building, keeping the line with setback with the line of the front of the house, so that along Connecticut Avenue, it keeps its urban form. Here's another picture. Here's one along Woodside. This one has not as many trees in it, so you can see right through it a little bit better. But it's got this bamboo here. And one of the other things that you'll notice is missing is there's an existing house, two-story house that's on the site that has been removed from here, which is one of the buildings that will come down as part of the redevelopment. I'd also like to point out, when we talked about connecting to the town sidewalk, our proposal is that we connect to it right here, that we connect and continue up this way to Corso. We could certainly use the other side, but we think that this is a better side for that and a logical place for the sidewalk to continue. We haven't done any grading studies, so I don't know whether it's got stairs or if it's a ramp or whatever it is, but it's intended to be, a short curved walk to get to the buildings over here. This view is taken from the corner on Meadow Lane. This is the existing building the existing patio that's there. It's actually under construction right now. And this is the tree we were out there looking at today. But you can see the building here has, which is way back on the hill. It has a nice texture to fit in with the forest environment, some balconies and terraces so that the residents can enjoy the nature and the wildlife. No path between here and the building. So a very natural environment along this edge. This is another picture from a backyard on Meadow. And you can see a very similar arrangement here. This house is a little bit higher on the hill than the one we just shared. But you can see it has a very similar type of pattern with chimneys, terraces, so that that people can enjoy the wooded area. This is a gap in between two of the buildings. So here is one building and here is another building. And back to Thornapple. This is all the way at the western edge of Thornapple. You can see the corner of the building here. Again, its colors are meant to blend in as well as they can with the natural colors of the forest. And again, keeping that setback line back from the front face of this house.
Grant.
Yeah.
This is Rich Brancow. Before you go on to that,
Sure.
Can you go back to the schematic of the heights of the buildings right before your massing views, that chart? I think one of the things I saw there may help people kind of.
Okay, sure.
Right there. The highlighted buildings behind your lines, are those the existing buildings of the 4-H, or are those?
No, those are the new buildings.
So what's the difference between them and the?
Sure. So this is a section. So it's what you're doing is you're basically taking a slice through the site and cutting it open so that you can see how the slice through the building. So let me go back one. It's a good question.
No, I see now. I thought it.
Yeah. So one of them is a slice through here.
Right.
And one of them is a slice through there.
Right. So the slice, the lines are that slice, but your buildings are the highlights behind that.
That's correct. So the buildings that are sliced through have this dark line.
Right. Okay,
And the buildings that are a part of those buildings or other buildings are behind it. Same that you see on the bottom.
right, thank you.
Sure. Construction. So there was a request to enter into a construction management agreement at the appropriate time. Definitely, we want everybody to be updated, and we want to make sure that there's something that if we need to know it, that the town tells us as well. So that communication is important. You know, continuing to notify the town of any special things. You know, probably going to have to close a lane on Connecticut for when they deliver the concrete. You know, it's going to be a temporary thing, but we want to make sure that everyone knows it so that we make plans for it. It's not going to be for the whole construction, just for a portion of it. Or if we have to, you know, if there has to be some heavy noise, we want to make sure that we give that information. We've committed to not using the town streets for any construction vehicles. They'll come on Connecticut into the site, either from the north or the south, so that there isn't any work to park or to even use the town roads to get to the site during construction. There was a request to provide phasing information, which we're going to provide as part of the LMA application in 2 weeks that we show you. There's generally 2 phases, but they are intended to be concurrent, so that one is built and the next one is built right behind it. We don't intend there to be some big lag in between them, but for financing purposes, it has to be built in 2 parts. Whoop. Hold on. So I know that was a lot of information. It was a lot of response, and hopefully there'll be some questions if I wasn't clear on something, or, you know, obviously we can be here to answer them after this.
Oh,
But
Grant, may I just ask a question before you go on?
sure.
And just sort of getting back to the pictures again. So
Yeah.
it looks like in your slice picture, as well as some of the photos, the
Mhm.
photoshopped images, it shows the buildings are not as high as the trees. Is that going to be true in all cases? Is that your intent? I know we've heard, I think that you're seeking in terms of heights, like 75 feet or so. But I'm not exactly sure how that fits within the trees. Are some of them going to come above the trees?
Sure. No, it's a great question. It's a great question. So obviously there's different height trees on different parts of the site, and the topography is much different. We go, you know, it's like 35 feet different on one side to the other. What we've done is we've tried to keep the buildings around the outside or on the perimeter lower, and the buildings in the inside taller. That way, when you see them, they look as small as they can look. But the trees right now are quite tall. There will be some in the middle that I think are probably a little taller than the tree. If that's 75 to 80 feet, it'll probably be exactly the height. And you'll have a chimney on top of that, you know, so technically it'll be taller. But the perimeter around it, for on the south side, west side, it's no taller than the trees that you see there today. That also, when you take into account that when you're looking at it, you're seeing the tree first and the building second, the tree always looks much taller, even if it's shorter than the building, because of the way perspective looks. So in the views that we showed there, they're exactly what you would see in terms of the height of the buildings. So I'll just go back to one so that we can, I mean, here you can see the trees look much taller than the buildings in this photo. You know, there are shorter trees along the west or along the southern side than there are along the other sides. But when you go to the section, you can see they're about, the tallest part's about the same amount as the trees there. I wouldn't call this accurate to a foot, but it is generally the size of the trees that are there now.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Sure. So we've been thinking about how to make sure that we can move forward with the process that is necessary in the county through the LMA and the site plan, and make some decisions about some common decisions about what the project's going to be and look like, but not have to decide everything because there's going to be a lot of other components that are added in as we move forward. Those are going to be, the utility companies and, the State Highway Commission and, building codes and, landscape by the planning staff and all of these things that are going to come as part of the site plan process. And we won't be able to get to that process and make those decisions and make all those things without first going through the LMA process. So what we've come up with is to create a letter of intent between the town and Corso. And that letter would say, here's what we think should be in these two documents that will, one, give the town comfort that we are doing what we say we're going to do, but also, two, it will give us comfort that the town is comfortable with what we're doing and we can move forward in the process. So it's really a benefit for both of us to have something written down that has a mutual agreement of understanding. And the reason why there's two of them, first, one is something that is very rigid and goes along with the land records, is a legal document that also follows the LMA. And there are things like the forest conservation. There are things like no cut through on Thornapple. They're the zoning that is on the site. Those are the major elements. And in the LMA, they're called the binding elements. And those would be created in a covenant that Corso would put on the land to ensure that what we've discussed here and what's been approved with the LMA is what is the requirement. So that's the first document. The second one is one that doesn't necessarily run with the land, but is a memorandum of understanding that is very similar to the one that the town has or had with the former 4-H headquarters. And that would talk about construction rules and the public access and using of the theater for town events and those type of things that aren't as cut and dry or rigid that you would find in a covenant. Those elements would be, those two documents would become live upon acceptance of the LMA. So that would be next spring. Because there's a long time between now and then, a lot of things change, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to make these documents as accurate as possible. So our thought is that we would create a letter of intent. It's not binding, but it really says, this is what we think should be in these two documents. This is what we, Corso, and we, Town of Chevy Chase, believe should be a part of that covenant and what should be a part of that memorandum of understanding. And we'll take the first stab at it, including the things that you put in your letter, and the things, even some additional things maybe that I've had conversations with residents that are very specific. But we will share that with our draft of the LMA so that can be reviewed in concert with those plans. Again, our plan is to, in about 2 weeks, share that with you, give you some time to digest it, and then really come back with any questions that you have, and hopefully work on that letter of intent over the next 6 weeks or so to 2 months, so that we can prepare for filing the actual LMA at the end of August. So with that, I've given you a lot of information. I probably have left something out and forgotten it, and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Grant and Tim, thank you very much. Really appreciate this review, and certainly it's given us yet a better idea of what you intend.
Yep. And
appreciate your thinking through very carefully where you've worked through our letter in terms of what we've agreed and where some things are not agreed, but all that is very helpful to have laid out so clearly.
Sure.
What I'd like to do first is, Todd, if you've pulled together questions from residents, by all means, why don't you bring them up now and let's cover them. And then I'd like to make sure my colleagues and I have a chance to ask some questions at the end if there's anything that our residents have not covered, but we'd like to review. Todd, do you want to lead the way with the questions?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Can you discuss how many living units will be in each building, or total number of living units? And what size they'll be? What's the mix?
Sure, it's still in flux. As I think we've discussed before, senior living doesn't just go on units. It goes on, some go on units and some go on beds. Beds for the assisted living and memory care, and units for the individual or the independent living. If you want to do apples to apples, it's approximately 450 units. But it's a range of memory care units, assisted living, and independent. And I would say about half are independent, about 40% are assisted, and the remaining 10% are memory care. And the memory care are really individual beds, but the assisted and independent living go from 1 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms. I mean, Tim, you can talk about the mix more if you can.
So just to give you a little clarity on how we go about creating that unit mix, it comes down to the social component that we're creating inside the community. So what we're looking for is we're creating a mix and a blend of independent living unit types. So we'll have what's called our city home, which will be more of our larger units, which will have a front door entry. It's for our truly independent people living in the community. And typically, that is somewhere in the neighborhood of out of the total mix, that's probably going to be somewhere around the 35, 40 city homes on the property. Those are only on the first floor because they have a front door entry like facing out to Connecticut Ave. And then we go into our larger 2 bedrooms, our 1 bedrooms, larger 1 bedrooms. And the reason for creating that independent unit, the independent unit has a complete full kitchen in it, because this resident is still capable of doing everything they've always been able to do. They have more of a fear of their health, or they've seen some health decline, or sometimes it's a couple and one has higher needs than the other. And so what we want them to do from a health standpoint is stay together. And if they can stay together in a larger unit, it promotes more health, but it also continues to allow the healthier one to maybe continue work or continue their social activities outside of the course of community. So just because they're living there doesn't mean that their social life is only there. It's still out in the community and still part of whatever organizations they're still a part of. When you look at, and so the difference will run, you're running from 1,250 square feet to a 300 square foot unit in a memory care unit, or 350 square foot unit in memory care. Because in memory care, what you want them to do is you want them to leave the room in non-sleeping hours and get out and be a part of stimulation. And then this is what we're talking about when we're talking about health sustainability, and we're talking about proximity, we're talking about transitions of space, senior scale environments. Senior scale environments is very critical to helping promote their social wellness. And what we found is, if for like a memory care person, if you're doing a 350 square foot and then they're going out into common spaces, we recognize that their health events are not as severe. And we also notice that there's more attention to that person, so that there's a lower probability of a hospitalization. So when we look at a unit mix and we say, okay, this is going to be 450, we don't start with that number. What we do is we start with, okay, I need a percentage of these different health acuity levels to promote health. And that's why you're going to see those really light assisted living, higher independent living. It's going to be around 65% when you blend all those really active people in there, because you need more active people in the community to help the ones that are struggling. So that's all part of this health sustainability model, and it's part of the care model, the transparency model of care. It helps us to be able to communicate that out to families. So I want to make it very clear. We're giving you the answer. It's like 450, but as we start getting into really refining the interior spaces, that number is going to slip back and forth as we're getting through that design. Because I can't tell you today that it's going to be 32 memory care. It may be 30, it may be 34, it may be 28. We haven't been able to dial into that exact design just yet. So that's why we're sitting at those numbers.
Thanks. Is there a possibility, or when can we see heights that are associated with each building or that correspond to your massing view photos?
Yes. And so I want to, so we've gone back and forth with this, being very conscientious of these images that we've shown you. And what we've done is on the outer perimeters, in every case, I can't think of a case where it doesn't happen, but the heights are like 4 stories, a living space there. And so that's what you're seeing. As you transition into, it'll stair step up into 5 stories. The highest point, there's only 2 buildings, I believe, that are a 6-story building. You can't see, or you don't notice them because of the way it's tucked into the center of the community. And the intent here is, it comes back again to this health sustainability model and transitioning from space to space and the scale. Proximity to senior is how far is my traffic pattern to where I eat? How far is my traffic pattern to where I see my friends? So that's why we've pulled the taller buildings into the center, so that the elevator is the actual distance from the room to the elevator, and then from where the elevator hits the main floor to wherever their destination is. So there's been a lot of work around that, and yes, we can show you those height elevations.
Yeah, the LMA application will have the height of the floors of the building on it, so you'll have
The LMA application, well, great, thanks.
Yes.
Are you able to provide separate phase 1 and 2 site landscape plans so that we can determine or see what the interim condition looks like, or what might be left if phase 2 is never constructed?
We can. It would be a better step in the site plan process, because that's when you really work out what the landscape character is going to be. We can certainly, as part of the LMA application, it will show the phasing, but it's the more detailed answer really should come in the site plan process. That being said, if phase 1 is only built and phase 2 is not built, it needs to be beautiful for the people that live in phase 1 as well. So I understand the concern, but it needs to be beautiful regardless from day one. So, but certainly as we go through the process, if we get to that point, we certainly will share that.
I was going to let Councilmember Rubin jump in with a question he has.
Great, thanks, Todd, and thanks, Grant and Tim, for not just responding and thoroughly and for this presentation, but for your engagement with us throughout the process. Just one quick question. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the sidewalk connection proposal with Thornapple and Woodside. I'm a big fan of integration of this with the town as much as possible, but share your estimates on foot traffic, what kind of impact that would have, just any additional data that you have at this stage on it to try to get a better feel for what impact that would have. Yeah,
so here's the one thing I want to say about foot traffic in a community like ours. In the initial phases of the project, whoever's typically walking their dog in those neighborhoods is who's going to be the initial people walking through our community. What will happen over time as those retail components? So let's say you have a shop, you have an ice cream shop. As that becomes established, and we will, I can pretty much assure you that's going to probably be in the phase one because it's such a critical component. As those components they become neighborhood transitions, and they become neighborhood destination points, they're not destination points for a wider, a broader audience that's traveling there, but it is a destination point for the neighborhood areas there. So what you will find is that foot traffic picks up, and then what happens with your residents, as your resident population grows, you'll find about 3 family members to 1 resident that are interacting with that community. So you're going to have one of those 3 that are going to kind of walk, or they're going to come to the community. They may park, a lot of them are going to come park in the parking deck, and then they're going to walk around our shop spaces and that type of thing. So, I wouldn't expect a lot more than what you currently have. But what you will have is, the 1 resident family member that comes with their grandchildren. Right now, for example, I have a daughter. This is a typical example, and I love seeing it. The grandmother is sitting in our cafe, and she's got her granddaughter with her, and they're having tea, usually is what they're having, because they love to have tea together. And what's happened is her daughter has dropped her granddaughter off while she's gone to a doctor's appointment or gone to do grocery shopping. And so that's the trend, that's the traffic pattern that you're going to see. And then when the daughter comes back over to pick up the granddaughter, what you see is she's hanging out for a few hours at the shops and also entertaining herself. So that's typically the traffic patterns you see in our community. Does that answer your question, Joel?
I would say, let me just add one other thing. I'm an urbanist, so I want more connectivity as well. I think you'll see as much pedestrian traffic as you see on a sidewalk in the town today. There's probably going to be a little bit more because the intensity of the use is a little bit different, but I think where we've placed them, there isn't I'm going to go on this sidewalk because the sidewalk is a thing to do. It's really just a way to get from point A to point B. And in the same way that sidewalks do throughout the town and other cities. So I think it's pretty subtle. But I think it's a measured approach to adding and to integrating as subtly as we can.
Thank you.
Thanks. So it looks like you have a 3D model that's developed given the precedent images you showed. Can you share that with the town?
So we don't have it's not a full model. We just rendered these pieces that go into the views. So there's no, it's really what you're seeing is what we have. It's also those models, you can kind of see them through the trees, but none of the windows are really worked out fully. The roof lines, the chimneys and all that kind of stuff. So I would hate to share something like that and everyone to think that it's the real thing when it's not. But we only created those views there. And so that's really what you would see. So
yes, and what Grant's saying is we rendered those views that you're going to see, and that from a stone perspective, from a chimney perspective, and from a massing perspective and a roof line, that is what you're going to see. That's what it's going to be. But the next step in the hesitation you're hearing from Grant is that, look, we're going to go into a deep dive on the design down to the coursing on the brick and the actual spec for the chimney caps and the windows, and we're going to match those up with the interiors of the floor plans, which we've looked at it from a grid standpoint, but now we're going to take that grid and really match it up even tighter. And as we're doing that, we definitely will have a 3D model. So in the process, you're going to be able to see the 3D model as we're developing it out. And that is something that, I've done it on my previous project here in Atlanta, that 3D model. Once we got through the design process and we were able to really show all those details, outside came first, and then about 6 months later, the inside came. So you're going to see a lot as you go through the process, but it's part of the process.
Yeah, and I will say we're just not there yet, and we're not going to be there for months, and because we have to get through the process of the concept before we go and spend a lot of energy to get that correct. So it will come. It's just part of the process that comes later in the grand scheme of things.
Any additional planning plans to further shield the new buildings from abutting homes?
Planting plans?
Tree planting or more vegetative screening on any of the sides to further shield the new buildings from the abutting homes?
Well, there's going to be a lot of landscaping that goes in. It's in and around the site. I mean, I think the biggest component is the keeping of the existing trees that are there. So keeping those are really what's going to shield, if that's the term. But there'll be foundation plantings and flowering trees and all kinds of stuff in and around the buildings.
And then, so along the property boundaries, not in the current buffers, but we will do some shielding with some additional plants. Just our residents want to be shielded just as much as the neighbor wants to be shielded. I mean, it goes both ways.
Thanks. Do you contemplate running any shuttle bus service to the Bethesda Metro for use by your residents or employees?
Yeah, so we do have transportation services. We use a black car service that's ours, and we manage all of it. So we have Sprinter vans and we have cars.
Thanks. And with the LMA, what zone are you going to be asked to change the property to?
I think it's CRNT. I think that's the one it is. It was in one of our response letters. I'm almost positive that's what it is. I keep the reason I'm hesitating is because I keep juxtaposing the R and the N, and I don't want to say something wrong.
Sure. We've discussed some traffic management and what you're going to be doing to determine signalization requirements on Connecticut, which is another question, and that is to be determined. Mayor Rush, that ends my consolidation of the comments we've received on the chat room.
Can I answer the question about traffic? Because I didn't really, there was a question about traffic and
about signalization at the entrance to the development on Connecticut and what will be required or necessitated by the development.
Sure. My answer is going to be something you've heard before, but it's not at this moment is when that is determined. That's determined at the site plan level. The county does have or the state does have a plan that they're working on for Connecticut. It is a long-term vision plan for it. It's in its draft stages now. It does not suggest to add a signal to that intersection. We've had conversations with them about potentially adding a hawk or a pedestrian crossing there, but that would come, next year in the analysis of the final building and in the site plan process. So, sorry, I just wanted to answer that.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions that they'd like to ask besides? Irene, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I had a quick clarification question around the affordable units. You mentioned independent living, assisted living, and memory care. Is the idea that affordable units would be spread across all three types of units, or are you focused just on the independent living?
So I'll take this one. The MPDU or the affordable requirements in the county aren't very nimble when it comes to senior housing. I think that's a safe way to put it. They have definitions for which units can and cannot be counted towards the amount of affordable housing. And it has to go back to this whole thing about what's a unit and what's a bed. So it's kind of an antiquated definition. The way the county says it is that if you have a unit, that comes into your pool of what will be affordable housing. If you have just a bed and it's not a unit without a kitchen, like a memory care unit, it doesn't qualify for the amount that you would need for affordable housing. So the affordable housing requirements of the county really have to do with how many units there are, and those are generally the independent living ones that are on the site.
Thank you.
And just to follow up, that'll be what, 15% of the units then will be MPDUs?
15% of the dwelling units. Yes, it's the requirement.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I have a couple I'd like to ask. Just make sure I understand. You're saying is that the relatively shorter buildings are now on the outside, the taller buildings in the middle. So when you show the picture, especially from down on Meadow, looking up, that was a 4-story building that we were seeing in the background?
That one I think is 4 stories with the 5th story being in the roof. Part of it is also how we deal with the architecture. So some of the floors, so you could have a 4-story building that looks like 4 stories because the roof starts at the top of the 4th story. You could also have a 5-story building that looks like a 4-story building because it has the 5th floor is in the roof and has dormers. So it's not just a straight, this one's 4 stories, this one's 5 stories. We've tried to make architecture that modulates the different heights so that, as you saw in the back one, there was 4 stories and the 5th stories in the roof piece that's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's more along the sides along Thornapple and to the south, where those 4-story elements without the roof come into play there. It also looks a little bit bigger from that side, given the perspective of what you see from when you're down at the bottom of the hill.
Right.
But it's not a pyramid. Because if it was a pyramid, it would look like a pyramid, right? We don't want to do that. So there are some 5-story and 4-story elements mixed in together on the side. There's some 5-story and 6-story elements mixed together in the middle. That's I think the best way to describe it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Could you say a bit more whether there's any fencing at all around the property or where the buildings, can you just discuss that a little bit?
Sure. So the fencing is there will be a fence between the, let me just pull it up. Can I share again?
Sure.
Okay, you can see that, right? Okay, there we go. You can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So along this edge, there the front doors will front onto the street just like you have in just like these houses. We'll probably have a 3-foot fence or some gates or something that are pedestrian in nature, not a security fence. The building will be the perimeter of the site. Same thing that happens here. Same thing that happens all along Connecticut. And then you transition here to where you have some door yards here. And so the fence may get a little bit more robust around these, but they'll be for these individual yards that are here, like you would have on any of the single family homes around the neighborhood. Same thing going on here. Around this side is where there will be a fence around here to ensure that nobody goes into the forest area. The height of the fence, I don't really know yet, and that's primarily because this road right here is depressed, or when I talked about the loading and the trash being below grade. So if this right here is up 14 feet above this, you really only need a 42-inch fence there so that somebody doesn't fall off. Mm-hmm. Nobody can climb up on top of it. So we'll keep the fences to a minimum. My guess is they're going to be pretty small along this edge, and it might get a little taller as you go up the grade to right there. But to enter into here from a pedestrian, there will be a gate that you need a card access to get through here. So this will be a little bit of a taller fence, say a 6-foot fence. But all of this will be building, building. These are the individual yards, and this will be completely open. So you will be able to stand here, walk straight through and in here, and you could get over to here and get out, but you couldn't get in. What we're trying to do is to minimize the ability to make the destination, to make these paths part of the destination. We want to make coming in this way from pedestrian the destination. So I know that was a long answer to your fence question, but
No, that's very helpful.
that's-
Where will the shops be, Grant?
Oh, sure. So right here and right here.
Mhm.
That's where we have them planned right now. So there wouldn't really be any need to come back over here. But this is the more the landscaping in this area will have more hardscaping, more cafe type tables and stuff. Whereas when you get back into this area and this area, it'll be more grasses and plantings. So the landscape will adopt itself to what the use is right next to it. But this area right here is where the shops would be.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Todd, do you have any questions before we end this evening?
I do. Could you confirm the proposed zone is CRNF, commercial residential neighborhood floating?
I'll have to get back to you on it unless Steve's on here right now. He can chime in.
Steve can raise his hand if he knows. I see.
Yeah.
Could you also discuss what, if any, uses require state licensing?
Yeah, well,
Go
I
ahead,
was
Jim.
gonna need, we have Department of Community involved with the license of assisted living.
And then as you have offered, if the town so desired, how soon could we have a design consultant join your team in some capacity?
I don't know that I understand the question.
I believe in lieu of submitting to DAP, you suggested we could have a design consultant join.
Well, I suggested that the town could have a design consultant that it relies upon to provide design, guidance for the town. And the town would provide us comments. I don't know that we would have someone on the development team that is your advocate. I don't know that you would want that.
Understood. Steve Robbins confirmed it's CRNF.
Great.
That's all I had, Barney.
I knew.
All right, good. Thank you. All right. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'd like to say, I really appreciated. Sorry, I didn't mean to-
Going through as you did in a very methodical way, the points of the letter and presenting the.
I lost you, Barney.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Grant.
I was just going to say, I've enjoyed meeting a lot of the people, a lot of the residents around the site over the last few months, and I really appreciate the dialogue. It's helped us to understand better, and I also will say that people are very passionate about the town and where they live, and I think that's a testament to the governing body and all the people that are in it. And it's it's good to work in this environment, and I just wanted to convey that.
Okay, thank you, Grant.
Yeah.
So thank you for this. So now it's back in our court for us to review what you said today.
It is, but we're going to provide you in about 2 weeks. We'll provide you with some more technical documents that we talked about here today. So you can probably relax until we get that, unless you want to have conversations among yourself.
But we'll certainly have conversations, and also for all the residents, we have a town council meeting coming up this coming Wednesday. And there is an agenda item to discuss this among just some initial reactions among the council. But we also invite residents to use the public comment period at the front end of that meeting, if you wish to express any views directly to the council at that time, based on what you've heard tonight. We certainly look forward to hearing from you. We obviously will also look forward to any comments you put in emails to the town office or directly to us. And we'll be sort of working out some sort of way in which we want to go forward to make sure we we actively solicit the comments from residents to what we've heard, so we can be well prepared for the next round of discussions. So with that, thank you all very much, and really appreciate the time. I hope people got a lot out of this, and we will be seeing you soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.